Have you been scrolling on YouTube and ever seen a tier list video before? Well, if you haven't, then I'm going to lift up the rock that you've been living under for the past few years. A tier list is a list where you can visually rank things from S to F. And today we're going to be using one to rank all the base tracks in MX bikes. And we're going to be ranking these tracks in 4 different criteria. The first criteria is looks. If the track looks good, they're going to get points for this. The second is flow. If the track flows good and feels good and is fun, then it's going to get points for that. Third, we have detail. This is about just how detailed the track is overall. And finally, we have difficulty. This is how hard it is for me to drive on the track. These scores are also all out of 5. So without further ado, let's get started on our first track. First up, we have Assen. This is a sandy and technical track. It's a pretty good looking track, so we're going to give it a 4 in the looks department. In flow, we gave it a 3 out of 5. In detail, we gave a 3. And finally, in difficulty, it was also a 3. I had fun on this track, but also found it difficult with the sand. I also didn't like that there wasn't very many berms to turn on. So I put it in the D category. Now looking back, I think it's a little low, but my point stands. Next up, we have Enduro. This is a track where you're going to race up and down hills. And to be honest, I think this track is ugly. It's just hills, grass, and trees, and for some reason, glitched out tape lines. So for looks, we're going to give it a 1. And I found it pretty hard to find and keep a flow, so for flow, we're going to give it a 2.5. For detail, we're going to give it a 1. There's nothing going on other than trees and grass. And lastly, I put difficulty at 2. It's a pretty easy track to rip on. So in the tier list, I'm undecided of whether it should be F or D, but eventually I choose D. On to the next, we have Forrest Raceway Short. This is the short version of the track that everybody says is the best track in MX bikes. So what do I think about the shorter version? In looks, it gets a 4. There's lots of things to look at. In flow, it gets a 4.5. It's a pretty good flow, though I think it would benefit from more berms. In detail, it gets a 4. And finally, in difficulty, it gets a 1. I put it on B in the levels. If you're going to use this track, just use the long version. Next up, we have the normal version of Forrest Raceway. Arguably the best track in MX bikes by some people. Do I think it deserves that crown? Let's find out. In the looks department, I gave it a 4, because even though it's a base track, it still looks pretty good. In flow, I had to give it a 5, because it's probably the best track for new people to learn on. For detail, I put 4, because even though it's a base track, it's still pretty well detailed. And finally, for difficulty, obviously I had to put it at a 1 because rookie drivers should be racing this track if they're just starting out. This track will help you learn the basics of the game and in turn get faster in laps and learning everything else. So if you couldn't have guessed by now, you can tell that I obviously love this track and I definitely recommend new people trying it out. So if we go back to the tier list, obviously I'm going to put it at an S. Next up, we have Holjes. There's not much to say about this track, even if you can call it that. It's really just a normal car racetrack that you can put dirt bikes on. Because of this, some of the scores are going to be pretty low. But in the looks category, it's pretty good. I gave it a 4. For flow, I gave it a 2 because there's no jumps or really anything to do. For detail, I gave it a 4 because it's a pretty well detailed car track. And finally, the difficulty is a 1 because it's really hard to mess up a track without jumps. Though you can hit some pretty cool wheelies on the small patches of concrete. When we head to our tier list, I put it at a D because there's nothing really to do on this track and nothing to play on it for. Next up, we have Holjes dirt layout. There's nothing really to say here. It's just the regular Holjes track with a dirt jump. So we're just going to put it above the regular Holjes because of the flow and call it good. Next up, we have Mantua. This is personally one of my favorite base tracks, so I might be a little biased in saying this, but in looks, I gave it a 4.5. This is about as good as a default track gets. With the lakes, signs, and everything around, and all the details, I think that the looks are probably the best in the game, in default track-wise. And for flow, I gave it a 5. Everything just blends so nicely together. If you watch the video that's playing right now, you can just tell that it's easily a 5. And the detail is also a 4.5. I don't know how much more detail you can pack into a default track. And last but not least, difficulty. I gave it a 2 because it's not too hard and it's not too easy. It's pretty good for beginners. Now, as you guys can tell, I obviously love the Mantua track, and I want to know what you guys think too in the comments, so make sure to let me know. I'll be eager to see what you guys think of Mantua. On to the tier list, Mantua is easily going to get an S for me. Up next is Maryland. This track is based in, guess where? Maryland. But it has some cool jumps on it, like you can see in the video playing right now, the big tube and the jump. There's all kinds of different jumps and random turns that'll kill you in the corners. Sorry about that, back to what I was saying. For looks on this track, I'm going to give it a 5. There's all kinds of crazy things in this track, like ponds, pipes that we already talked about, signs, and all kinds of cool stuff to look at while you're driving. On to flow, I give it a 4 because once you figure out where the tight turns are after the jumps, the track feels very smooth. On detail, I also gave it a 5 because this track is just so detailed in every way, in the pits and everything. And for difficulty, I did give it a 3 because you do have to know the track before you go in, or else you're going to be bombing every single corner. With all that being said though, this is definitely one of the best tracks, so let's go on to the tier list and see where I put it. Back on the tier list now, I'm going to put it at an A, but if there was an A+, that's where it would be. Next up is MXB Club. This track really surprised me. I was expecting a not very good track, I guess, and this track really blew it out of the water. It really surprised me, and it's actually a good track. Let's get into why. First off, on the looks, this track does look very good. It has a nice forest around it, it has fences everywhere, it looks pretty good. So in looks, I gave it a 4. So for flow, this is where the track surprised me the most. The flow on this track is insane. I was not expecting the track to be this flowy, so I did give it a 4.5. On to detail, I gave it a 3. There's a pretty good amount of detail here with tires and boxes around. And lastly, on difficulty, I gave it a 2. This is pretty simple for new people to learn. On our tier list, I gave it a B. Looking back though now, I would definitely put it at an A. Also, if you guys have been enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe and like, because these videos take a long time, and if you want to see more like this, let me know by liking and subscribing. Okay, back to the video. Up next, we have Nevada 2013. This is one of the two base Supercross tracks. And if you've tried them before, you know that they're very hard. Okay, anyways. On the looks, I gave it a 3.5 because, I mean, there's no crowd. What else is there to say about that? And for flow, once you get a hang of what you're doing and you actually stay on both of your wheels, it's a pretty good flow, so I gave it a 4. For detail, I gave it a 3, again, because there's no crowd and it just looks really weird without anybody in the stands. And of course, for difficulty, I'm going to give it a 5. These Supercross tracks are insanely hard. So on the tier list, because of things like difficulty and no crowd, I did end up giving it a C. On to the next Supercross track is Nevada 2018. Because 2013 and 18 are basically the same track with just different layouts, we're only going to talk about the layout for 2018. I do think this track flows better than 2013, so back on our tier list, I'm going to put it above 2013. Our next track is Practice Track. On this track, you can get some crazy speed before hitting jumps. In the looks department, I gave it a 2. There's not a lot to look at on this track. For flow, I gave it a 3. There's not really a lot of bumps or anything to hit in between jumps. For detail, I gave it a 3 as well. And finally, for difficulty, I gave it a 2. Onto the tier list, I put it onto a low D. Next up is Practice Track Short. There's nothing else really to say about this track, it's just the practice track but shorter. But because there's no long jumps on this map, I think that the flow gets a little bit better, so that's what we're going to give it a 3.5 for. On the tier list, I put it behind both of the Nevada tracks. Nearing the end now, we have Straight Rhythm. What surprised me about this is it was really not a track, it was a time trial. So it's hard for me to rank this stuff, but I did anyways. The goal of the trial is to follow a straight rhythm and get the fastest time you can. Though that actually doing this is difficult because the track is very hard to drive on. But getting into the ratings, I gave it a looks of 2, a flow of 3, a detail of 2, and a difficulty of 3. Onto the tier list, I gave it a low D. Up next, we have Washington. If you've been watching my streams lately, you know me and Washington are very well acquainted. Besides that, this track is absolutely beautiful with trees everywhere and then all kinds of scenery. It's awesome. That's why it earns a 4.5 in our looks category. In flow, it earns a 4. In detail, it also has a 4. And finally, in difficulty, it has a 3.5. There is a kind of a learning curve on this. And you better get used to seeing this track if you're going to be racing public lobbies, because this one will be a common. But in all, this is a beautiful track and an actually good track too, which is a good combo, obviously. So I think it's going to rank really high. Speaking of ranking, let's get to our tier list and rank this track. On the tier list now, I'm going to put it at an A underneath of MXB Club. Last but not least, we have the 2 Winchester tracks. Starting with basic Winchester, the track is a little plain. So in the looks department, we gave it a 2.5. But the track does make up for it a little bit in the flow. In flow, we gave it a 3.5. And in detail, I gave it a 3 because there's track assets and boxes everywhere, but other than that, there's not much detail in this track. And in difficulty, I got a 2.5. It's not hard to race on this track. There is some weird turns that might surprise you, but other than that, it's pretty easy. So with that, let's get to our tier list. back on the tier list, I end up giving it a low C. I feel there's a lot to be desired on this track. And finally, to our last track, Winchester MXON. Is this going to be better than the regular Winchester? Let's find out. So first off, the looks are completely the same, so they're going to keep the same scores. Looks being 2.5 and details being a 3. With those two out of the way, we can finally get to the real differences. The differences being the shorter track. This might be the only example in the base game of a shorter track actually being better. The shorter track has more berms and more jumps and is more compact and has a way better flow, so that's why we gave it a flow of 4.5. But with all this more technical stuff, the difficulty did go up a little bit. The difficulty sits at a 3 on this track, but I think it's worth it for how much better the track is in general. This is also the version I've seen more in multiplayer, so expect to see this one in public lobbies more. So let's get back to the tier list and see how this one places. And on the tier list, I put this one at an A. I think it deserves it. With that concludes our tier list. This is what the final tier list looks like. If you guys think I should change anything, let me know in the comments. And also let me know if I did a good job. I also want to take a second to thank you guys. My little video I made last week is kind of blowing up right now with over 1,000 views. That's way more than I thought I'd ever get. Also, our channel is about to hit 100 subs. By the time this video is up, we'll probably have 100. But I just want to thank you guys so much for all the support, and I love making these videos for you guys. So if you guys have any ideas for videos you want to see, or if you just want to tell me I suck, let me know in the comments, guys. But I think that's going to wrap this video up. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye.